I gave this name From War to Illusion. You understand why. The rise, decline, and rebirth of authentic Aikido. Well, you know me, 5th Dan Aikikai, technical director of Ryu Shinjuku Dojo, 8th Dan Aiki Budō, Daishiham from the Nihon Budō Kokusai Renmei, the Japanese Budō International Federation. I created Shinken, which is a system for people that practice Aikido. It's not a style of any kind. I practice martial arts since 1979 and Aikido since 1986. So this is very important. Everything I'm going to say here, this is not intended to declare that anyone's practicing Aikido wrong, nor it is an attempt to dictate what Aikido must mean to every practitioner. Every person and every dojo has the absolute and inalienable right to practice the art in whatever manner best serves their purposes, whether those purposes involve physical exercise, meditation, cultural preservation, community, personal development, spiritual practice, martial effectiveness, or simply enjoyment. No individual requires my approval or anyone else's approval, the Aikikai's approval in this case, the federation's approval, but that each dojo has their own criteria and their own federation, to practice Aikido as they choose. My concern is not personal freedom, but intellectual and martial honesty. I'm concerned about the gradual decay of an extraordinary art, the ridicule and public humiliation Aikido now frequently receives, and the growing separation between what some training methods appear to promise and what they can reliably deliver. Cooperative and non-resistant practice can be valuable for learning movement, developing sensitivities, cultivating awareness, and preserving safety. But it becomes dangerous when practitioners are encouraged to believe that a success under predetermined conditions demonstrates an ability to defend themselves against an unwilling, unpredictable, and generally resisting attacker. So I always say this: you can practice Aikido in any way you want. You're always going to have some benefit from it. The problem is the martial side and the illusion that entails. I'm therefore not criticizing people for choosing a softer, spiritual, recreational, or non-competitive form of Aikido. I'm questioning the presentation of cooperative performance as proven self-defense and the creation of confidence that has never been honestly tested. Every dojo remains free to define its own path, but freedom of practice does not remove the responsibility to describe that practice is truthfully. My purpose is not to police Aikido, but to defend its dignity, preserve its depth, and prevent beautiful training from becoming either a public joke or a potential dangerous illusion. So why did I decide to create this lecture, and why I'm like in this crusade? You guys know, you have my books, why I decided to do that. That's why. Joe Rogan, Aikido sucks. This is just a sample, like Aikido, bushidō. This black belt is useless. Aikido still sucks. 3 reasons Aikido doesn't work. Everybody hates Aikido. So this is just the perception, let's say the PR perception. And that's my area of expertise, marketing and PR. So that's the world perception. Here is the Aikido Journal. I don't know if you're familiar with Aikido Journal. I really encourage you to visit aikidojournal.com. They have a series of articles about exactly what you're talking about. This shows the decay of these are numbers. We can all have an opinion about things, but this is data, is numbers. And you can see Aikido is decaying like considerably, in an average of 9% a year, and things are just getting worse. This is the recent one. Here is United States, and this is the world. So this is from 2004, and here what we are. We are plateauing a little bit, but still, it's like a free fall. And this is like the founder of Aikido Journal was Stanley Prany, which is arguably the greatest researcher of Aikido in history. He passed already, and this is like a 2011, I guess, this article, Towards a Reform of Aikido, Technique Background by Stanley Prany. So he passed already, and now Josh Gold is the editor. And there are many articles there, and I encourage you to go there and see. Aikido's branding problem. Will Aikido become the Kodak of martial arts? Because Kodak refused to accept the fact that digital cameras were coming. So they decided to say, okay, we're going to stick with film, and then that's what happened. So there is obviously a value, and we're going to talk about that, about tradition, but we have to know when tradition stops and progress starts. This is Jigorō Aikido of Hungary as another very nice article, and I encourage you to go and read it. The Twilight of Aikido, the reasons for its declining popularity, and the state of other martial arts in the modern world. So Aikido was already decaying before COVID. When COVID came, it just made it worse. Considerably worse. Many dojos closed and never opened up again. I'm going to just point some of the reasons why. We have the aging of the Aikido communities. It's very hard because of MMA and the real life effectiveness of Aikido being questioned. It's very hard to get new people. Internal problems of fragmentation. There's like, a lot of people that happened to me, like realize what's happening with Aikido in 1995. And I said, well, this is not going to be sustainable. And the proof is in the pudding. We can see that's happening now. So I left many federations and many organizations because of this problem. And the lack of effectiveness. Some senseis are not open to understand why and try to fix. So outdated structures in communication, clash of teaching traditions with modern expectations, negative online presence, and that's, as we saw in the beginning of this lecture, is one of the main reasons why is a lot of bad press, a lot of bad PR for Aikido. Shift in values and lack of patience of modern society. And we're going to see that in the lecture, that Aikido takes more time. You guys know, you practice it. So that's one of the reasons why, if you want to use it for self-defense, it takes a lot more time than anything else. You can go in 6 months, you can learn how to kick and punch. And even in like a wrestling, jiu-jitsu, something in 6 months, you can learn something. In Aikido, it takes a lot longer, because the fighting is important, and as we will see, but it's just a byproduct. The burden of the martial art label, which is a huge problem. The question of quality and comprehensibility of demonstration even at high levels. So even people with years and years of Aikido are not able to demonstrate it in actual effectiveness and enough to convince people to practice. So here we see the fall from grace. Once an art born on a battlefield, refined over centuries, feared and respected. Now, mention it among serious fighters, and you may hear chuckles or polite silence, beautiful but delusional, elegant but useless. In parts of the art, neither honest as combat, nor deep as a path, and a beautiful shell. So this is also very important, because many people claim that, okay, we are not a real martial art, but our goal is not fighting. But we also have the depth as a spiritual and philosophical path that is lacking. The original teaching of Aikido had both. So now we are not doing either, because I would understand if Aikido became more like a religion or a philosophy or something like that, I would understand, okay, we abandon the martial part, but at least we have this side, like philosophy and spirituality, let's call it, personal refinement. We are strong doing that, but we are not. So we are not doing any. Why do I mean by weak? Technically, technique collapse as resistance rises. Pedagogical, uke behaviors gives nage no honest information. And that's, I always mention that during class. The fact that we need cooperation, the uke has to cooperate with nage, that doesn't mean let nage do whatever nage wants. That means I'm helping you to progress. And by helping to progress, I have to test you gradually, slowly, so you can grow. I cannot block you from doing the technique in a way that you can never learn, or you're going to use your strength. And I also cannot let you do it in a way that you never know if it's working or not. So this is very important, and this is one of the main problems. Institutional, rank, ritual, and loyalty replace inquiry. So this is very important. In some areas, and that happens with all martial arts, it's not an Aikido problem. Aikido became a cult. So you don't question the teaching that is given, you just blindly follow. Which is, in the beginning, you have to do it because there's no other way of learning if you don't do that. But the way your sensei created Aikido, it is something that's supposed to grow. It's supposed to be in constant development, in constant evolution. So that's the concept of takemusu aiki, is creativity. Philosophical, harmony becomes avoidance, not discipline, restraint. So, in a nutshell, some mainstream Aikido pedagogy is lost its feedback loop. This didn't happen equally in every lineage of our dojo. So there are some dojos that still keep that, or parts of that, but as a mainstream movement, unfortunately, we don't have it. So how to read this lecture? We have documented history, supported by historical records and scholarship, dates, institutions, events, is this blue label. We have lineage, tradition, legend, it's the yellow one. Stories, a school tells about itself, meaningful and informative, but transmitted, not documented. Founding, legends, origins, myths, and lineages. In interpretation is my analysis and proposed cure. Arguably by design, this is where you are invited to disagree. So nothing I'm saying here, I always like to quote the Buddha when he said, don't believe because I'm telling you, don't believe because you heard the prophets or the sages or the mystics talking about. Question everything, test, and if that works for you, fine. If it doesn't, throw it in the garbage. A fourth tag, history plus interpretation, mark slides that mix documented fact and my reading of it. Okay, so that's how you should understand. So the first is from survival systems to modern Budō. So anytime people think about samurai, oh, samurai. This is how it started. The Kofun period, it's violence, pure violence is like fighting, savage fighting. There's no spiritual stuff, there's no religion. You have religion, but the religion is not related to fighting. So I don't want to go because, each one of these slides we can go 2 hours in it, and I don't want to waste time about that without losing the actual purpose. So modern martial arts begin with the way and work backward. So this is important. History run in the other direction. First violence, then technique. Only much later did ethics arrive to govern the bloodshed. This is Budō that people don't understand. You cannot be a Budoka without being a Bugeisha. Bugeisha means the actual fight, the actual violence. You have to first master that to say, okay, now I'm going to use all this knowledge I have to use that for my refinement and for my spiritual, let's call enlightenment or progress or anything. The warriors were not knights in the beginning, so they started all these fights until the unification of Japan, and all this loyalty that we understand about samurai, it's something a lot later. The loyalty was contractual. Betrayal, ambush, and finishing the wounded were routine. Early samurai were mounted archers. So they used to use bow and arrows, and they used to use spears. The katana was a last resort, but only when they didn't have any other weapons. So a lot of people don't know that. This period here is 1 century of continuous civil war. So you have the clans, you know, all the samurai movies you watch are about this period. This is very important, this here. Natural selection applied to violence. Schools that failed vanish. Only what work under armor, exhaustion, and error survive, which is why so many Koryu lineages are fragmentary. Koryu means the old martial systems, the old martial combat codified systems. Aikido, we're going to see later, was created in the 11th century. The fact that Aikido made until today and passed through this era here means a lot. Okay? I always say I repute Japanese people as very smart. Okay? I don't think they would look at the Aiki-jūjutsu, Daitō-ryū techniques and say, okay, this sucks. Let's keep teaching that for 1,000 years. The fact that that was tested in the battlefield. And here we have firearms in 1543. Important to remember, if samurai worship tradition, they would have refused the foreign gun. They embraced it because it worked. Honor bowed to effectiveness. So this is another proof that the reason the technique survived was because it worked. What we call the bushidō, which is actually became famous when this Japanese writer wrote a book about it, and it became more famous here than in Japan, is interesting because it's almost, I'm not an expert in ninja, but it's almost like what happened with the ninja. Like ninja was more famous here than in Japan, and then it's a lot of misconceptions, it's a lot of romanticizing, it's a lot of, it's like another area that I study, which is the chivalry. When you, European chivalry and Arab chivalry, the European chivalry always says, oh my God, this is so beautiful, all these knights and swords and armors and stuff like that. Like if you go actually to study, the hygiene of these people, terrible. It's terrible to fight under armor. It's a lot of romance. So we see the movies, we see the stories, and that's something we got like attached to a fantasy more than the actual reality. So the bushidō is not the spiritual philosophical stuff of the samurai. That's not it. Some people think it is. Some people don't understand that it actually happened because there was no war. So they forced themselves to actually go to a more monastic, didactic, educational, let's call, process. And with that came, they say, okay, well, I hold all this power, this martial power, the power I can decide life and death. Because, you know, during a period in Japan, a samurai was walking in the street and he could just decide, okay, I'm going to cut your head off. So I have all this power. Now, since I cannot use it for actually killing people or going to war, what am I going to do with that? So they then, for characteristics that we're going to talk next weekend, which is the spiritual and religious side of Aikido, that Buddhism has a thing called Tantra, which is the enlightenment through daily activities, and one of them is war. So you can reach enlightenment from Japanese garden, from ikebana, the flower arrangements, tea, chado, tea ceremony, anything. You can, by ritualizing and spiritualizing a simple daily practice, you can become enlightened. So that's the same thing with martial arts, and that's why we have Budō. This code was never an actual code. So this is, again, there was like some things that were common to all samurai, but others not. As you saw, the loyalty and the honor was like conditioned to allegiance to a clan and stuff like that. So this gentleman here, the Meiji emperor, was responsible for the first watering down of the martial arts, Japanese martial arts at least. Why? Because the Meiji Restorations, he wanted a rapid westernization, modernization, in a series of actions. The samurai class, this feudal classes and everything, because he wanted to go, he started dressing like the West. He created universal conscription, meaning mass citizens joined the army to replace the hereditary warrior. He stopped giving stipends to the samurai, and you can no longer wear swords in public. Actions that in 1877 we had this Satsuma Rebellion, the last samurai revolt, that was crushed obviously with the help of the United States and machine guns and things like that. That was the first time, and then the warrior arts fold into Budō, away rather than the war. The blade was replaced with ritual, the technique with etiquette. This becomes the template Aikido, and the other all martial arts would repeat. So this is the first blow to all the martial arts, not just Aikido. After World War II, during the occupation, even Budō, even saying, okay, I'm just using martial arts for spiritual ways. The American occupation saw that as even, you go to a karate dojo and you see them fighting, you see any martial arts, you see fight, you say, okay, these people are training and they are very disciplined and they're very determined. They are rebelling and going to create problems for us occupying Japan. So Shogun MacArthur was the responsible for that second blow, let's call. The survival adaptation. So judo became a sport. Karate turns into teaching children. Aikido leads to peace and spirituality, partly principle, partly position. So that was Kishomaru's Doshu, the son of O-sensei. That was his idea, because he was a insurance clerk. His mentality was not a warrior mentality, was not a sage like O-sensei. There was a mystique. He was not that. He was a practical guy. So he said, well, we need a way to make sure Aikido is not going to be suppressed, because again, judo, it was genius what Jigorō Kanō did of putting in schools and involving education and things like that in it. So let's understand the origins of Aikido. So here, this is a legend, but it's a very, let's say, developed legend. In the 11th century, as I said, Prince Minamoto no Yoshimitsu, he codified. He was observing this spider catching a larger insect, and the way to move around the insect, and the way that a smaller spider could get a bigger insect. So he codified and he created what we know as Daitō-ryū Aiki-jūjutsu. So that's the principle of Aiki, blend with control rather than clash. Whether or not the spider was real, the idea that encodes is real, and it defines that art's character. Note the irony. Aiki, now tied to peace, was born as a smarter way to defeat a stronger enemy. It's very interesting how we have both aspects, and both aspects have to be in harmony. That's what I means. I means harmony, love, but this universal love. O-sensei trained with many different teachers in many different martial arts, but his main teacher was Sogaku Takeda. Sogaku Takeda was this, imagine a guy invincible. He was the perfect warrior, the perfect samurai. And he was like a descendant from the prince. The Takeda clan, that was, the lineage was passed directly only inside the Takeda clan. Okay, his family and There's a lot of very important warriors like the Takeda Shingen that I put a picture here later. So what we need to know is that O-sensei learned everything he could from him. He was not his favorite student. On the contrary, they had a lot of clashes. He never gave O-sensei a full Menkyo Kaiden certificate. He got authorizations for him to teach. But O-sensei was looking to him and said, well, this guy is so powerful. He's everything I always wanted to be as a warrior. But he's in constant fear. He has to cook his own food because he's afraid of being poisoned. He's always afraid of walking here, walking there, and being ambushed. So that's good, but there's something missing. That's when he met Onisaburo Deguchi, which is the founder with Nao Deguchi. They founded this sect that's called Omoto-kyo. Omoto-kyo, Shinto is let's say, the indigenous religion of Japan. Buddhism entered later from India to China and from China to Japan. But Shinto is the original religion of Japan. Omoto is like a, let's say, rebranding, like a neo-Shinto religion. So this guy was like this very charismatic leader. Many spiritual lineages came from Omoto-kyo and come from this, like a Seicho no Ye, which is very famous, the Messianic Church, etc. So another huge influence on Morihei Ueshiba, or sensei, was Jigorō Kanō. And Jigorō Kanō himself was really in love with Aikido. So when I started teaching 36 years ago, I taught a lot of judo, because judo is I started judo in '79. It's very popular in Brazil because of the Japanese colony. I had this friend that was a sensei, an author, and he said, you know, I love Aikido. And when Jigorō Kanō saw Aikido the first time, he said, this is the real Budō. This is my judo. And then he sent his best students to train. And one of them was Kenji Tomiki sensei, which founded Tomiki Aikido later. Jigorō Kanō was great not only about codifying judo, because he just got a particular brand of jiu-jitsu, because this is important. Jiu-jitsu is not one thing. Jiu-jitsu means like, let's say, codified combat. So each one of us can practice jiu-jitsu and end up being completely different methods, okay? So that's why Daitō-ryū Aiki-jūjutsu is one thing, Goshin Jiu-jitsu is another thing. So Jiu-jitsu is a lot of things. So Jigorō Kanō got one type of Jiu-jitsu and he made judo. He adapted and created judo. And because he introduced that to the schools, he also adopted this belt system that we know is his creation. So there's a lot of things, and he is like a national treasure, like O-sensei is a national treasure in Japan too. The reason why judo was still able to survive with certain, let's say, respect was because of the competition, something we don't have. Here's O-sensei's timeline. 1915, he meets Sokaku Takeda, and he dedicated his life to Daitō-ryū. His approach is very, very violent and very. So when we see like O-sensei like smiling, and so this is later. Like in the beginning, he was like, it's very probable that he killed a lot of people because he went to war. He went to these crazy adventures with Takeda. With Deguchi later on. So in 1919 to 22, he meets Deguchi, moves to Ayabe. Aiki fuses with Omoto spiritual practice well before the war. But still, his school was called, one of his school was known as the Ushigome Hell Dojo, because training that was hell. It is not, if we talk about that today, people think we're crazy. But that's how it was. And then of course we got wartime. In 42, the name Aikido was formally adopted, and he started going deeper in the religious aspect of Aikido. We all saw all that happened with the Meiji Restoration, with occupation, the marketing, globalization, non-competitive training, incentives for safe mass instruction, because that was also something that Doshu Kishomaru implemented. He wanted to spread Aikido. So if we see the O-senseis, let's go Okuden or Uraden, which are like the secret teachings or the most private teachings, every martial art, everything that is elite, the name is already says it. Elite is not mass developed, is not mass promoted. So it's very hard for you. We're going to talk about that in the next Saturday when you talk about religion. Every teaching has three different layers. One is the external or exoteric, one is internal, esoteric, and then you have a secret one. So the first is to explain things for everyone. That's in religion. You know, sometimes you have illiterate people, so you have to find a way to pass the principles to these people. Then you have the people that are a little more advanced and educated. So then you need to sophisticate this teaching so can reach them too. And then you have the secret. The secret is the personal experience. Is the last stage. So everything has that. So but you can only have a mass promotion of something. You have to water it down. You have to make sure that children and old people can practice in a safe environment. That's what happened. So to survive, in order to survive, and in order to have a commercial appeal, we need to have a lot of people involved. And remember the conditions that we're talking about, the post-war and everything. And O-sensei was kind of in the minds of a lot of his students, O-sensei was kind of crazy in his spiritual quest. So people didn't understand what he was saying. We're going to see again that next Saturday. And again, I put this picture here because here you can see like Yamada Sensei, Kobayashi Sensei, you have Tamura Sensei, you have all these uchideshi post-war, and you see these people, they're not interested in what the old man is saying. They want to fight. They want to learn how to fight. They want to have fun. They want to party. And O-sensei is in a complete different quest here, a complete religious, spiritual. So obviously, what these guys learn is not shinken shōbu, is not martial effectiveness. And with the guidance of Kishomaru, because something you guys have to understand, these people that train with O-sensei directly, they were not all the time with O-sensei. They trained with him eventually, but they were mostly training with Kishomaru Doshu. They were mostly in Tokyo. Some of them went to Iwama and stayed in Iwama because O-sensei was most of the time in Iwama. So Saito Sensei was a lot of time with him. But all this other guys that went all over the world to spread Aikido, they were not part of that religious thing. I was with Yamada Sensei for 14 years. I never heard him talking about religious, spiritual things. Maybe he spoke about that, talk about that with other students in different, maybe I was not close enough to him to have this kind of teachings, but I never heard. It was most about practice, most about how the technique is, how you should practice, how, but never about some deep spiritual things that are important. Everything is important, okay? But I never heard because they were not interested. They're not interested in that. And this is something very important. Remember I talk about Omotokyo. There's a sensei in Brazil that he was this disciple of Yasuo Kobayashi Sensei. Okay? Yasuo Kobayashi Sensei, he was his uchideshi. And he became Omotokyo priest. This uchideshi of Kobayashi. And he went to Brazil to teach. And he said, what O-sensei was talking about was even hard to Japanese people to understand. And he is a Omotokyo priest. Imagine to these guys here. So it was a very sophisticated, it was very high spiritual teachings. So it was very hard for this. And again, after he died in 69, it was even less and less and less and less and less. So that's how we are today. So now let's understand the situation with MMA and the practical side of Aikido. How we are today, an unspoken pact runs many mats. Don't make it too hard, fall when you're supposed to. Uke falls, sometimes before contact, and the biggest fall wins applause. If Uke will fall no matter what, Nage never learns whether the technique actually worked. The information channel is severed. If your training only works when your partner plays along, it isn't martial, it's rehearsal. So this is very important. This is the progressive, how you can train safely. Progressive strength, progressive speed. You start, you can train with different levels. So that's, I always say that Aikido and golf were the only things that you can train with people in a different. Golf because of the handicap. So you can have a pro playing with a beginner because of the handicap. And Aikido is the same thing. Because I have 40 years of Aikido practice. I can get someone who's training the first day, and I can train with that person. But I need to help that person. And sometimes helps me too, because I learn. That's a great thing about Aikido. You always learn. You learn when you're teaching, you learn when you're learning, you learn when you are with an advanced practitioner, you learn when you have with a beginner. You're always learning. But you have to learn in an honest way. How is it honest way? Progressive strength, progressive speed. Okay? PS. I just created a formula. PS. Okay. The closed loop of confirmation. When partners follow in command, students feel competent and instructors feel powerful. That's why in my book that you guys have, I say masters that cannot fight and students that think they can. Because, of course, what they are watching, my God, I can throw someone 20 feet away. I'm very powerful, right? Wrong, you can't. You're just being part of a pantomime. So the real danger isn't uselessness. It's unearned confidence. Skills certain in the mind, never tested in the body. Safe illusion produces unsafe practitioners. And that here's my point. You practice 20 years. You have third dan, fourth dan. You think you know something, right? Wrong. You probably don't. Why? Because you never trained it. As I always say, you never bridge the technique to the real life, to the reality. So that's the problem. So what MMA has, and again, I know that very well because when I started to teach was the beginning of UFC, was the beginning. So I had, and again, I was born and raised in Brazil, so I have a lot of people coming to my school to test. A lot of jiu-jitsu, UFC was created there, Brazilian jiu-jitsu was created there. So I had a lot of people from many martial arts who came to test me. So I had to give birth to that. It was not an option to me, or I'd be humiliated in front of my students. So obviously, MMA have this ongoing test against a fully resistant opponent. And much soft Aikido failed it publicly. Many of these videos that I showed in the beginning of the lecture, the thumbnails, you can watch the videos, and some people are, because they think that, oh, I'm training like that guy Rokas said, well, I train Aikido for 15 years. I'm a third Dan. This is useless. Why? Because he trained wrong. As I always say, if your goal in life is to see a sunset, and you walk every day at 5 a.m. and you run east every day, you can run the whole day, you can run as hard as you can, you're not going to see a sunset, because the sunset's in the west. It's behind you. You're never going to see it because you're running from it. So it doesn't matter. 15 could be 50. It doesn't matter. If you don't train right, you can have all the benefits. I'm not saying it's useless. You can have all the benefits training differently. But obviously, if your goal is to have some fighting, you have to train right. There's no other option. And MMA is the ultimate test for that. That's when everything you learn meets reality. Cannot escape. You simply cannot escape. So, my goal is not to replace Aikido with MMA. Okay? And it's not defensive denial. I cannot say, no, Aikido is not supposed to do that. We're supposed to all be friends. And, a lot of people say, no, you have to see, that's not the goal. Or Sensei said the goal of Aikido is we all have to be a big family. Well, I don't know about you, but my family fought a lot. But anyways, the point is, we have to evolve, because Sensei said Aikido should evolve. Okay, tradition is good, but that doesn't mean you have to be 500 years. You have to keep respect tradition, but within the tradition, you have to be able to evolve. And that's what's lacking for us. So, and then comes one of my favorite words, shinken shōbu. These are three very important terms in Aikido if you wanna get the red pill instead of the blue pill. And shinken shōbu means the mentality, the wisdom of fighting with real blade, with real, is a earnest of life and death. What it is, the condition which technique loses theatricality, intention is pretense, and ethics their abstraction. Is the feedback loop named when consequence is real, truth emerges without negotiation. And I argue that shinken shōbu is the only mechanism that is going to trigger what O-sensei called takemusu aiki. What is takemusu aiki? Takemusu aiki is the evolution of Aikido, is the ultimate stage of Aikido, which is when you start creating. You're no longer thinking kotegae shirimi, ikkyo, nikkyo, sankyo. The technique flows in you. Okay? And I experienced a second of that, triggered by shinken shōbu, when I was attacked in Istanbul 10 years ago. It's magic. It's magic because I was just watching. I was just in a back seat, and the technique was doing the rest. So this is the most important thing. But what is not shinken shōbu? Okay, so now we have to have this idea that let's kill everybody, let's see blood, let's fight. No. That's not a glorification of lethal combat, and it's not permission to hurt training partners, not danger for its own sake. No, that's not violence. We have to differentiate the word effectiveness of violence. They're two different things. I teach since 1990, okay, and I never had a serious injury in 36 years of teaching. Obviously, I had like knee problems, like shoulders, small stuff, people breaking a toe or a finger, something like that. but I never had a serious injury. I had a couple of serious injuries when people train after the class is over. I left the tatami, I was in my office, and then I had people like training in a dangerous way, and they got hurt. But even that was not, they're both fine today. So Shinken Shōbu is the most important thing, and that's why I wrote a whole series of books about Shinken Shōbu. Okay, this is Takeda Shingen, one of the Takeda ancestors of Sogaku Takeda. He was a samurai lord and very famous, and he has this very particular samurai helmet. And so, again, Bugeisha before Budoka. Bugeisha means combat practitioner, because what Budō means? Budō means stop the war, stop the war. But you cannot stop the war, stop the spear, if you see the kanji. But stop the war, you have to be powerful to stop the war. You cannot stop the war and say, imagine, you are in the middle of a battlefield, you go there, stop, stop. No one is going to stop, right? You have to be powerful. So that's what people don't understand. And Budō is not the samurai spiritual stuff. Budō is not the samurai spiritual stuff. Okay? So it's not like, okay, the samurai was fighting in 1425, and then he decided that, oh my God, I have to be spiritual. No, no. This is not Budō. Okay? Budō is when you understand the might and the power of the martial combat, the martial skill, and you decide not to use it. You decide to channel that power to your personal refinement, your spiritual refinement, any way you want to call it, like religious refinement, personal refinement, philosophical, ethical, moral, anything. So, the structural sequence: before refinement, substance; before restraint, power; before ethics, danger honestly faced. Shinken Shōbu. Bugei, arts of war and survival. Budō, the way that governs the power once you truly hold it. So you need to master the arts of war. You cannot be a Budoka. You cannot practice Budō if you don't master the arts of war. If you don't have that Shinken Shōbu in you. O-sensei said that a million times, and his direct disciples confirmed that. You have all the quotes in the book. Many, many times he said, there's no Aikido without Shinken Shōbu. There's no Aikido without Shinken Shōbu. O-sensei said, Bugei wa Bugei desu. Martial way is martial way. He said, Aiki wa otori janai. He said, Aikido is not a dance. He said that, not me. So, Budō without Bugei is not Budō, is etiquette, is theater. Okay? Restraint is meaningful only when excess is genuinely possible. Why it reframes peace? A man who cannot fight but claims moral superiority is not peaceful. He is harmless. And again, you don't want to hurt people. But you are a warrior. You want to be able to protect weak people. You want to be able to protect nature. Like O-sensei said, how can you do that if you are harmless? If you have no power? From where you are going to extract this power to channel it so you can get enlightened? There's no way. So O-sensei's sword that gives life, he said that, the sword that gives life, is wielded by someone who first mastered the sword that takes it. So this is why, this is exactly the connection people are missing. Sunao, the sincere attack. PS, progressive strength, progressive speed. Sincerity is the language at the art. Sunao is the full honest intention without malice. This is important. What Aikido doesn't have is shiai. Shiai is the confrontation. So that's why it says that we have to collaborate. Okay? Again, collaborate doesn't mean pretend that you are powerful when you are not. Okay? So, without malice, but I have an honest intention. When I'm attacking you, I'm attacking you. I can attack it slower, I can attack it a little weaker, but is real attack. I'm not letting you get away with it. And if I'm too strong or I'm too fast, I slow it down a little bit. And then I try it again. If it's still too much, I slow down a little bit. If it's too slow and too weak, I strengthen a little. Progressive. And then if I see that, okay, now he's doing well, I do a little more stronger, a little faster. Aikido is a dialogue. Sincerity is the language it's spoken. A dishonest attack cannot evoke an honest response. Okay? Sunao, uke, the guardian of truth. Sunao is how uke protects nage from illusion and how nage protects uke from stagnation. This is very important. Okay? And it's trainable. Okay? PS. Oh, Sensei, it's not a game or a show. It must be practiced with the spirit of shinken shōbu. Okay? Aikido is not read it again. Oh, Sensei, Aikido is not a game or a show. It must be practiced with the spirit of shinken shōbu. Okay, this is another thing that is extremely important, because we said we have to master the fighting. Okay, we have to understand the fighting. But in what degree? Should we become MMA fighters? No. Why? Because we have to understand this. This is very, 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 very important, and is in the books. So you can go there and you see the Aikido You're Doing It Wrong book. Okay, 3 circles, 3 destinations. Okay, so you have martial arts, the path of self-transformation. Your goal, your ultimate goal is not to fight. Your ultimate goal is to become a better person. Okay? Better character, discipline, mind, body, unit. The metric is, are you better today than yesterday? And is a path for the whole life. It's not like, okay, I want to be able to... You can start with goals like, okay, I want to be able to do this technique, or I want to be able to fight 2 people. I want to be able to get rid of attacks. I want to be able... You can set goals, but the purpose of Aikido, and all the martial arts that have a do in the end, is a lifelong practice because it's a path. Okay? Then you have combat sports, which is the arena of victory. What's the goal? The goal is to win. You have no other goal. You have to fight and you have to win. Period. There's it's a very objective. Martial arts are subjective. Okay? In self-defense, what's self-defense? What's the goal of self-defense? Survive. So I don't know if you're going to run away, if you're going to scream. Survival. Survival is the goal. And they intersect. It's a little washed up, but they intersect, okay? So this circle here is self-defense. This circle here is martial arts, and here combat sports. I don't like to call combat sports MMA because it's not an art. MMA is not an art. MMA is a combat sport. You have many, your goal here in self-defense is survival, de-escalation, real-world threats. In martial arts, discipline, philosophy, spiritual growth, awareness, control, and then combat sports here, your competition, rules, performance, preparedness, ethics. When they intersect, you have adaptability, purpose, training, intent, technique, pressure, testing. So here in the martial arts and combat sports, when they intersect. So you have a lot of, here in the top, you have awareness, control. So you can always revisit this diagram. Is very important to understand how different they are. So here, self-defense, options of self-defense. You can fight, which is what people assume that is the correct way, which is not always the correct way. In my opinion, the always correct way is de-escalate. The first thing is you have to de-escalate. You have to do whatever you want, whatever you can, to go back home in one piece. That's your goal in self-defense. But you can run, you can call the police, you can call your father, you can cry, and pretend that you are, mentally ill. You can pretend that you have a heart attack. You can pretend that you are crazy. You can call a lawyer. You can do anything possible because your goal is survival. Your goal is to avoid the confrontation. And again, there's no shame in running. Okay, as one of your instructors, I'd rather you tell me a story that you ran than a story that you got stabbed because you tried to defend yourself from someone with a knife. I always use this analogy about the comparison between martial art and combat sport. So martial art is like a road trip. Your goal might be drive to a nice place, might be with a family, spend time with the family. It might be the destination, it might be the journey, you don't know. It's very subjective. In a combat sport, it's like a car race. It's very objective. You have to be number one. There's no other option. Number two is already not good. You have to be number one. It's very objective. But where are they similar? The car. You need a car for both. You don't need the best possible car invented by the human mind, but you need a car that works, the car that has all the tires, the car that has oil. You have to put gas. You have to have all the lights, right? What is the car? The car is the fighting. So you need to have, in the martial arts, you have a fight that works. It doesn't have to be the best possible fight ever, but it has to work. You cannot have a car trip without a car. You cannot have a martial art without the fighting. Can I call ballet a martial art? No. Why? Because there's no fighting. So if my technique is harmless, it's a dance. It's not a fighting. You see the difference? So that's the problem. Another analogy I like to show is, and again, I'm not diminishing combat sport. I have many friends and I have a huge respect for people that do it. I'm just personally against taking blows to the head. Any activity that takes blows to the head, I'm not a fan of. Why? Because we already have a problem with the lack of intelligent people in the world. If we keep taking blows to the head, we're going to have less and less intelligent people. So that's not okay. But, and again, you see, you have all these fighters, and it broke my heart to see Rickson Gracie, this legend of jiu-jitsu, a greatest athlete. He probably never had a candy bar in his life. He was like the most healthy person ever. To see him with Parkinson's, and is induced, it's like a Muhammad Ali, induced by taking blows to the head. But comparing, okay, so both of these activities is applying paint on a surface with a brush. Right? You agree with me? They're both exactly the same definition. Applying paint on a surface with a brush. However, here is a subjective result. I'm not crazy about Picasso's Guernica, but many people think it's a genius. So it's subjective. Like martial arts, it's subjective. Your goal, what your goal is going to do for you is subjective. Here, you're painting a wall. It's objective. You have to, I can tell, anyone can tell if it's well painted or not. If you're missing a spot, if you have, it's not correctly painted, you don't have the coats correctly, I can tell. Here, I cannot say this is wrong. Can you say this is wrong? No. I don't like it. I prefer his blue face, but it's subjective. This is important. We have to preserve tradition without becoming a performance. If the hakama, the bowing, the certificates are real, if only the comeback is fiction, the art becomes a costume drama. So we are doing theater, not martial arts. So it cannot just look impressive, it has to be impressive. It doesn't look impressive at all, and it is impressive. In reality, is effective than actually looks. Okay, this isn't about ego, it's about integrity. Aikido that works, looks pretty, but feels more true. So here's what I said about, then comes the question. So if I just want self-defense, should I practice Aikido? The answer is no. Not because Aikido doesn't work as a self-defense, Aikido works as a self-defense, but because it's going to take a long time for you to master it if you practice in the right way to get here to self-defense castle. Whereas if you train any other, like MMA or boxing or jiu-jitsu, karate, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, you're going to learn something in 6 months. And you're going to get here eventually. In Aikido, it takes a long time for you to learn how to, my God, I am the worst athlete in the world. It took me 6 months to have a decent fall. I don't think I am a great ukemi guy today, okay, but 40 years later, but it took me 6 months to say, okay, now I cannot hurt myself falling. And then you have to learn flow balance, martial art journey, the spiritual part, the technique mastery. You have to, I can teach you in 30 seconds how to kick. This might not be the greatest kick ever, but you're going to learn. I can teach a monkey how to punch. But how can I teach you the flow and the balance? How can I teach you harmony? How can I, so it's a long pathway so you can reach the self-defense castle. It's a long pathway for you to understand how you can use all these crazy teachings, all these crazy positions in a way that you can apply that in self-defense. So if my goal is self-defense, I'd rather go this way. It's faster. For self-defense, Aikido or combat sports? It's your own decision, but what's the pros about combat sports? Faster, better physical shape, main objective is fighting, better if you just want to fight and you are young. The cons, injuries, short lifespan, depends on physical strength, no additional benefits. Your goal is fighting, this is your choice. And if you're young, this is your choice. I was already teaching, I was very close in my town to Anderson Silva. I was good friends with his master, his name was Noguchi. I know Rudimar Fedrigo, which was the teacher of Vanderlei Silva. And Vanderlei, he's physically really bad. I think he's a little younger than me. And he is like in a very bad shape physically. Why? Blows to the head, blows to the face. So this is a very dangerous way of life. And the chances of you getting hurt are huge. You're going to get hurt in Aikido too, but it's a lot safer, 1,000 times safer. Aikido, pros, safer, non-dependent on physical strength, can be practiced until old age, multiple other benefits like mindfulness, cultural studies, weapons, etc. So Aikido has a, when you start, for example, I do calligraphy, I studied religion, I studied Japanese culture, which actually I recommend everyone that's trying to understand Aikido to learn Japanese culture, because it's very hard for you to understand many things if you're not familiar with the Japanese culture. The cons is slower process, okay, less physical, less direct. Fighting is a byproduct. Fighting is important, but is a byproduct. Now let's understand here the chances that we have to facing a martial arts practitioner. So if we have a self-defense situation, we have a 9% chance of fighting someone that practices martial arts. Why? Because 9% of the world practice martial arts. Of this, chances of facing a combat sport fighter, 1%. Because that's the amount of people in the world that practice MMA, combat sports. I don't like MMA anyway. And the chances of fighting an untrained person are around 90%. So this is for the people that said, well, Aikido only works for someone that is untrained. So the chances of you facing someone is 90%. It's overwhelming. Like every religion, like every philosophy, like everything, you cannot cherry pick things, facts of O-sensei's life, especially in the end, and say, oh, he said Aikido is peace, Aikido is this. So I forget everything else he said before because I don't understand in context, okay? Everything you read, you can justify slavery in the Bible, you can justify genocide if you take things out of context. This is what I mean by, because O-sensei did it as a shrine, is not, tradition is not the enemy. You have to cultivate tradition. You have to cultivate everything that O-sensei said, but in a way that you can evolve and do the things that he said. So tradition must be tested. In science, medicine, and sport, the past is respected but never blindly obeyed. Tradition without testing becomes superstition. We don't want superstition. Superstition is not okay. A technique isn't right because it's old. It's right because it works. Under pressure, against resistance and motion. The honor of a martial scientist, keep experimenting. Don't embalm one snapshot of him. Something that a lot of people criticize about Aikido is that many of the techniques are from the battlefield. So when you are attacking, like you thrust, and you're going to do like a spear movement or something like that. This comes from the medieval battlefield. So obviously, by the time that O-sensei learned these techniques, it was still relevant the way it was fought. Because, for example, you used to fight before the Second World War, you still used to fight a lot of bayonet fighting. So you can see the usage of some Aikido techniques that be very effective for that. But now, things evolve, so we have to evolve with the world. Again, tradition should be like a whetstone. Sharpens you, but you are still the blade. Honor the past by giving it a future. Study O-sensei as a man, brilliant, flawed, evolving, who left a blueprint to build upon, not a shrine to guard. We have to, this is a very, very important thing. We have to honor tradition, respect it, but not protect it from inquiry. Inheritance, not a burden. The restoration protocol. Aikido problem was never spirituality, compassion, or cooperative practice. It was letting cooperation replace honest feedback. Back again, PS, PS. What is real cooperation? PS, PS. We have some ideas here, and again, it's my idea. I might be wrong. You might have a better idea than mine. It's totally fine. But I hate people that said, well, this is so wrong. Someone has to do something about it. And give zero ideas of what can be done. So I'm the opposite. So I'm suggesting what can be done. Efficiency without essence is brutality. Essence without efficiency is fantasy. Train both every class. Cooperation, not compliance. Uke is a co-creator, not a prop. Commit the attack and the resistance gradually. Randori becomes normal, not exceptional. Randori is the bridge between waza and reality. Teach concepts, not techniques. Kata, the form. O-sensei said that Aikido has no kata. Why? It has no form? No, it has form, but it's called waza. Waza is a principle. So this principle we train in the beginning is a kata. When you train in waza, when you start training, it is a kata. You have to repeat exactly as it is. But later on it evolves and becomes a principle. And if you don't let go, and there's even a Buddhist saying that says that, if after you cross the river, you still carry the canoe, you're stupid. Because you needed a canoe just to cross the river. Why are you going to carry the canoe, right? So the same with the waza. There's a time that you have to let go to the waza to get to takemusu aiki, which is the latest stage. Not 180 variations. The principles being distance, mai, posture, entry, irimi tenkan, unbalancing kuzushi, connection, musubi. So this is the most important. Integrate modern science, biomechanics, video, mobility and strength, sports psychology. Refusing this doesn't make you pure, just inefficient. Depth over head count, a higher context art. Not everyone is ready, and that's fine. Transmit an unbroken essence, one practitioner at a time. So remember what I said about elite? Aikido is very sophisticated. Aikido, in the beginning, until the war, it was just transmitted to high nobility, high military ranks, and high masters of other martial arts. After the war, then it was open. But it's a very sophisticated, and that's the reason why it's not for everybody, unfortunately. Progressive resistance, it's here. Here's the essence of PSPS: cooperative form, variable attack, progressive resistance, constrained randori, and reflection. So we have to after the class, and that's one of the reasons that we always do the breathing exercise, the meditation exercise, because you have to sink in everything you learn. You have to understand what you've done wrong and what makes you be in the right path. How to make it tangible? It's atemi, which is very important, juwazai randori, takemusu aiki. This is when the technique becomes creative, honest ukemi, reflection, and meditation. If you notice, that's in every class I try to have all of that, because this is the pathway to fixing what I think it's not working. And this juwazai and randori is important because you have to be challenged by that feeling. I don't know what's coming, and I have to make it work. I don't care, no matter what. That's why I developed Shinken-ryu, which is for people that practice Aikido already. That's a prerequisite. If you want to go deeper in all the aspects of Aikido, because training 3 times a week, you cannot go deeper. Shinken-ryu is to embrace a more martial. You go one step further in the martiality, one step further in the spirituality. That's what Shinken-ryu is. Uraden, Okuden is a more private. So the objective of Shinken-ryu is not to grow, is to be a close group. So it's not another style, another martial art, another style of Aikido. No, Aikido is Aikido, but you need to know Aikido to learn Shinken-ryu. So that's what Shinken-ryu is. Okay, so the goal is not brutal to be relevant, not mystical to be deep, only honest. And there's nothing more honest and more spiritual than the truth. The Bible says the truth will set you free. So being truthful, I prefer a friend that's even the saying, if you compliment me, you are my friend. If you criticize me, you are my master. So I rather be criticized in something that makes me grow. That's why there's such a deference, there's such a respect to the enemy. A high warrior respects the enemy because the enemy is the one that shows my flaws, shows where I have to be stronger. So, and that's very spiritual, by the way. So Aikido is not a relic to be worshipped, but a living path to be walked, tested, and evolved. Stop polishing the sheet and rediscover the edge. Reunite martial pressure with ethical purpose, the sword and the spirit together. This is very important. My whole lecture is not advocating just for the martial side. I'm advocating also for the spiritual, philosophical side. Because Aikido is both. Aikido is Takeda and Deguchi, the Takeda's influence and Deguchi's influence on our sensei. That's why it's called the pillars of Aikido. Sogaku Takeda Aiki-jūjutsu, or Nisaburo Deguchi, or Motokyo. So this is important. We need both. So objections and the other sides of the case. Where exactly is the line between useful cooperative drill and comforting fantasy? That's something we have to find out ourselves in our dojo. Can an art be genuine path for transformation without ever being pressure tested? I don't think so. Is intentional exclusivity fidelity to depth or just gatekeeping? So this is a question again about your own dojo. In your own training, what is tradition and what is traditionalism? Stronger countercase. Aikido is deliberately non-competitive. Cooperation is a philosophical choice, not a failure. Resistant lineages already do much of this. The problem is narrower than Aikido. Some Riddle Sensei late years as growth, not decline. Take this as a whetstone, not a verdict. Test it in a mat, which is exactly what the argument asks. So again, my message with this lecture is about testing. About you find how you should use this information in your own practice. And here's the books that are where I took this lecture, which is the Aikido, You Are Doing It Wrong. And again, I'm not saying anyone is doing anything wrong, it's just a provocation. There's the Budō, the Samurai Illusion, where I talk about how Budō became Budō, and how you have to be a Bugeisha without being a Budoka. And then the trilogy of Shinken Shōbu, which is the forgotten heart of Aikido, that I explained Shinken Shōbu in the way O-sensei explained it. And then a practical guide to Aikido, how to apply Shinken Shōbu. And then the soul of Aikido, which is the spiritual teachings of O-sensei that, in my opinion, are being more and more forgotten. Because we have this mask, let's call, or this cape of, okay, I'm practicing Aikido, I'm not being violent, so I'm keeping on O-sensei's spiritual teachings. No, you have to go and understand exactly what O-sensei was talking about. I also wrote these books. This is one of the latest ones. I talk about Shinken Shōbu and how Shinken Shōbu is applied in all the martial arts, in all combats, and in your life too. I use scientific cases to explain, scientific research to explain Conor McGregor's last fight. He was prepared, his adversary was prepared. How come he lost in like 5 seconds? It's here. So it's not just technique. So my theory is that technique is important, but it's 20 to 30% of fighting. 70 to 80% is mind. Your mind has to be prepared. And then here I talk about the very polemic Qi, the Qi in China, and how all the other traditions, prana in Sanskrit in India, and then I talk about science. What science knows about this energy? And then the modern samurai is how we apply Aikido principles to business and leadership and things like that. Domo arigatou gozaimashita. Thank you very much.